often get asked to do different cases on the channel, but over the last few years, this case has been the one that has been most constantly requested. But before I tell you where we are going and to what year, I would like to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, June's Journey. Like many of you, I've always been interested in historical crime and the mysteries that surround them, which is why June's Journey has always been one of my favourite games. If you haven't heard of June's Journey, it's a free-to-download game set in the 1920s, where you have to look for clues and objects in a series of visually stunning scenes. Using what you found, you advance in this amazing murder mystery story and try to piece together who murdered June's sister. During the game, you play as June, going through all the twists and turns of the case, and you even have a little mansion that you can expand as you progress in the game. I've been enjoying June's Journey for a while now, and it's a great way to distress after a long day, and very satisfying finding new clues, bringing you one step closer to solving what happened. June's Journey is available on Android and iOS mobile devices, as well as on PC through Facebook Games, and you too can download June's Journey for free by clicking on the link in the description. Today we will start our story in Spain, before moving on to Mexico. So please sit back as we go to the mid-20th century. Jaime Ramon Mercader del Rio Hernández, commonly known as Ramon Mercader, was born on the 7th of February 1913 in Barcelona. His mother, Eustacia Maria Caridad del Rio Hernández, hailed from a wealthy Cuban family and was an active member of the Spanish Communist Party. His father, Pablo Mercader Marina, had a background in the Catalan textile industry. After Ramon's parents divorced, he grew up in France with his mother. The 1920s and 1930s were challenging times for Spain. The aftermath of World War I had brought economic instability, and the country was marked by political polarisation and social unrest. Different political groups, including socialists, anarchists and nationalists, all competed for influence, which often resulted in violent conflicts. The collapse of the monarchy in 1931 and the rise of the Second Spanish Republic deepened divisions between left and right-wing factions. Ramon became involved with the leftist Spanish groups during this period, and as a result of his actions, he served a brief period in prison. In 1936, the political tension culminated in Spain being plunged into a devastating civil war between the Republican government and the nationalist forces led by General Francisco Franco. The conflict was a result of deep-seated political, social and economic tensions within the country. Ramon Mercader joined the Republican forces in opposition to General Francisco Franco's nationalist troops. During this period, he connected with Soviet intelligence operatives who recognized his dedication and ideological commitment. He was recruited by an NKVD officer named Nahim Aitingon and subsequently underwent training as a Soviet agent in Moscow. Around the same time, his cousin, Maria Mercader, who was an actress, married Vittorio De Sica, who was a notable Italian film director. In 1938, Ramon was chosen by Soviet intelligence for a critical mission, the assassination of Leon Trotsky. Trotsky was a significant figure in the Russian Revolution and a vocal critic of Joseph Stalin. Stalin perceived Trotsky as a threat to his regime and considered his elimination a top priority. Leon Trotsky was born on the 7th of November 1879 in Yanovka in Ukraine, then part of the Russian Empire. His parents were hard-working farmers, and their modest background installed in Trotsky a strong work ethic and a commitment to social justice. As a young man, he displayed exceptional intellect and a passion for learning. He attended school in nearby Odessa, where he soon distinguished himself academically. His intellectual prowess and radical tendencies became evident during his teenage years, when he became involved in revolutionary activities and joined various underground Marxist groups. In 1897, Trotsky joined the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, also known as the RSDLP. This was a Marxist political party which advocated workers' rights and challenged the rule of Tsar Nicholas II. Trotsky's political activities led to his arrest and subsequent exile to Siberia in 1898. During his years in exile, he continued his political writings and studies, delving deeper into Marxist theories and refining his revolutionary ideology. After escaping from Siberia in 1902, he travelled across Europe, engaging with prominent social thinkers and activists. He participated in the 1903 split of the RSDLP into Bolshevik and Menshevik factions. Aligning himself with the latter, he played a pivotal role in the Russian Revolution and over the next decade became a prominent figure within the socialist movement. He gained a reputation as an eloquent speaker, a prolific writer, and influential Marxist thinker. However, Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky did not share the same political ideology. Stalin promoted the concept of socialism in one country. He believed that the Soviet Union should concentrate on establishing a functional socialist state within its borders before actively pursuing the spread of communism to other nations. On the other hand, Leon Trotsky advocated for Trotskyism, a distinct political ideology characterized by the idea of a permanent revolution. He argued for the Soviet states to prioritize the global expansion of communism. Following Vladimir Lenin's death in 1924, the leadership of the Soviet Union was in question. While Trotsky was a leading contender, Stalin's consolidation of power began earlier, as he had been appointed General Secretary of the Communist Party, and this had given him significant influence over party affairs and appointments. Stalin aligned with Trotsky's opponents, securing his rise to power. Following this, Trotsky increasingly found himself marginalized, and in 1927, he was eventually expelled from the Communist Party. 2 years later, in 1929, he was exiled from the Soviet Union. Over the next decade, he endured a series of forced displacements. Fearing for his life, he sought refuge in various countries, including Turkey, France, and Norway. In 1936, Trotsky and his wife, Natalia Sedova, received an invitation from the Mexican president, Lázaro Cárdenas, who sympathized with his cause and offered him asylum in Mexico. Cárdenas was known for his progressive policies and support for refugees who were fleeing from political persecution. He believed that Mexico could provide a safe haven for Trotsky. Trotsky accepted the offer and arrived in Mexico in January 1937. Initially, he resided in the home of the muralist Diego Rivera and his wife Frida Kahlo. However, due to ideological disagreements and personal conflicts, he moved to a separate residence nearby and still in the picturesque area of Coyoacan. While in Mexico, Trotsky continued his political activities and maintained contact with international leftist movements. He established the Fourth International, an organization aimed at uniting revolutionary social forces globally. He also wrote prolifically, producing works on Marxism, the Soviet Union under Stalin, and the prospects of a global revolution. Trotsky had decided to take up President Lázaro Cárdenas' offer and settle in Mexico, as he believed that the country offered a degree of security. However, his presence in Coyoacan sparked controversy and tensions within Mexico's political landscape. His radical ideas and his ongoing criticism of Stalin and Soviet policies drew both support and opposition from different fractions within Mexican society. Despite being in exile, Trotsky remained a target for Stalin's regime, as he was still viewed as a threat. Soviet intelligence services, including the NKVD, launched multiple assassination attempts against Trotsky, all of which were thwarted or failed. In 1938, when Ramon Mercader was studying at the University of Paris, he became friends with Sylvia Agaloff, a smart young woman from Brooklyn, New York, who was also known to be close to Trotsky. With the help of Mark Zaborowski, Ramon took on the name Jacques Monard and told her that he was the son of a Belgian diplomat and admired Trotsky's work and ideologies. When Sylvia returned to New York, Ramon joined her. but instead of using papers with the name Yak Monar, he adopted the name Frank Jackson. Strangely, a misspelling had occurred during the document forging process, resulting in Jackson being spelt without a K. While Sylvia questioned him on this, he replied that he needed to change his identity to avoid military service. In October 1939, Ramon joined Sylvia in Mexico City. She had already established herself as a member of the Trotsky's inner circle and was friends with his personal secretary, a lady named Ruth Fisher. Ramon hoped that with her by his side, he would be able to get close to Trotsky. Sylvia started to work in Trotsky's home, and Ramon's presence as Frank Jackson became familiar to the Trotsky household, as he often dropped Sylvia off at work. Stalin was still determined to eliminate his rival and approved 2 assassination plans in 1939. The first involved an attack by David Alfaro Siqueiros, a Mexican muralist and NKVD member. On the 24th of May 1940, a team disguised as soldiers fired over 200 bullets at Trotsky's home. Astonishingly, Trotsky and his wife survived. Following this, another team was dispatched to carry out a second assassination attempt. This was led by Nahum Eitingon, the man who had recruited Ramon back in 1936. It was agreed that Ramon, who everyone knew as Frank Jackson, would gain access to the Trotsky household through his connections with Sylvia Agaloff. He would then pose as a Trotsky sympathiser and gradually gain the trust of the guards. However, a complication had arisen. Following the May attack, security measures at Trotsky's home were significantly heightened. There had been installations of additional locked doors, which were controlled by a guard tower. If Ramon's assassination attempt was successful, he would only be able to escape if the guards let him out. But if anyone would realise that he had just killed Trotsky, he would be left with inside the house. For this reason, an ice pick was chosen for the weapon of choice, to ensure a silent and swift death, as opposed to using a pistol or a knife. Believing that Ramon Mercader followed Trotsky's ideologies, Sylvia confided in him and shared sensitive information about Trotsky's movements and the household security measures. Unbeknown to her, this information only assisted to further his sinister agenda. On the 20th of August 1940, Ramon was alone with Trotsky in his study. It was his 10th visit to the house. He approached Trotsky under the pretense of showing him a draft of a magazine article that he had written. As Trotsky examined the document, Ramon struck him in the head with the ice axe, inflicting a severe injury. Despite the blows, Trotsky fought back, screaming for the guards and engaging in a physical struggle with Ramon until reinforcements arrived. Hearing the commotion, the guards rushed into the office and began beating Ramon, nearly killing him. Remarkably, despite his own injuries, Trotsky remained conscious and ordered his men to spare Ramon's life and allow him to speak. Nahum Eitingon and Ramon's mother were waiting outside the house with separate getaway vehicles. When Ramon failed to return as planned, the two hastily fled the scene and left the country. Trotsky was immediately rushed to the hospital, where he underwent surgery, but sadly succumbed to his injuries the following day. At the time of his death, on the 21st of August 1940, he was 60 years old. The guards handed Ramon over to the Mexican authorities. However, he insisted that his name was Jacques Monar and claimed to the police that he had intended to marry Sylvia Agaloff, but Trotsky had forbidden their union. According to Ramon's account, he engaged in a violent altercation with Trotsky, which fueled his desire to commit murder. In Ramon's words, "Instead of finding myself face to face with a political chief who was directing the struggle for the liberation of the working class, I found myself before a man who desired nothing more than to satisfy his needs and desires of vengeance and of hate, and who did not utilize the workers' struggles for anything more than a means of hiding his own paltriness and despicable calculations. It was Trotsky who destroyed my nature, my future, and my affections. He converted me into a man without a name, without country, into an instrument of Trotsky. I was in a blind alley. Trotsky crushed me in his hands as if I had been paper. Following his capture on the day of the attack, Ramon was promptly arrested and charged with the murder of Leon Trotsky. Sylvia Agalov's involvement in the events surrounding Trotsky's assassination cast a shadow of suspicion and controversy over her. While she was not directly implicated in the murder, her close association with Ramon Mercader raised questions about her level of awareness and potential complicity. She was subsequently investigated and interrogated by Mexican authorities, who sought to uncover any possible connections or knowledge that she may have had. She maintained her innocence, asserting her ignorance of Ramon's true intentions. She was released without charge, although the extent of which she was aware of his plan to assassinate Trotsky remains a subject of debate and speculation among historians and researchers. Following the assassination, Ramon Mercader's mother, Eustacia Caridad, was honoured with the Order of Lenin for her involvement in the operation. The trial of Jaime Ramon Mercader del Rio Hernandez for the assassination of Leon Trotsky began in March 1941 and attracted significant international attention. However, at the time, his identity was not known. He was tried under the name of Jacques Monard, and it was not until the collapse of the Soviet Union that the truth about his true identity emerged, revealing that Ramon Mercader was the person responsible for the assassination. He was represented by a team of lawyers who sought to build a defence around his alleged disillusionment with Trotskyism and his desire for revenge against Trotsky for perceived betrayals. However, it became increasingly clear during the trial that Ramon had been acting on behalf of Soviet intelligence, and his defence strategy crumbled under mounting evidence. Witness testimonials, including those of Trotsky's family members and security personnel who were present during the attack, provided a detailed account of the events leading up to the assassination and Ramon's role in carrying it out. Evidence was presented of Ramon's ties with the NKVD and his training as a Soviet agent, further establishing his connections to the assassination plot. Despite attempts to depict him as a disillusioned individual acting independently, the overwhelming evidence of the Soviet affiliation and the detailed planning involved in the attack made it clear that this was a politically motivated act orchestrated by the Stalin regime. As a result, Ramon Mercader was found guilty of the murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. His time in prison was marked by the political climate of the Cold War era. He remained unrepentant, viewing his actions as a sacrifice for the Soviet cause. His unwavering loyalty to the communist ideology and his refusal to denounce his role in the assassination further solidified his status as a devoted agent of the Soviet regime. During his time in prison, Ramon put in a number of requests for parole, each one which was denied. However, Soviet handlers made sure he was provided with some comforts during his imprisonment. These included financial support and a girlfriend named Raquelia, who was a Mexican actress. They eventually got married and had 2 children together. In 1960, after serving just over 20 years in prison, Ramon Mercader was released. His release stirred controversy and generated international attention, as many saw it as an indication of the Soviet Union's continued influence and manipulation in global affairs. On his release, he relocated to Havana in Cuba. In 1961, at the age of 48, Ramon travelled back to the Soviet Union, where he was personally awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, one of the country's highest honours, by Alexander Shelepin, the head of the KGB. For the remainder of his life, Ramon split his time between Czechoslovakia, Cuba, where he worked as an advisor for the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and the Soviet Union. The infamous murder weapon, the ice axe, was stored in a Mexico City police evidence room for several years before being acquired by Alfredo Salas, a secret police officer who passed it on to his daughter, named Ana Alicia. She kept it under her bed for 4 decades, until in 2005 she decided to sell it. Esteban Volkov, a grandson of Trotsky, offered to provide a blood sample for DNA testing to authenticate the weapon if she agreed to donate it to the museum at Trotsky's former home. Anna declined this offer, seeking financial gain from its sale. The ice axe was eventually purchased by an American collector named Keith Milton, prominent author and founding board member of the International Spy Museum. Many people believed that Ramon's formative years in Spain, coupled with the intense political climate at the time, set the stage for his later involvement in international communist activities. His upbringing within a politically active family and the circumstances in his country in the early 20th century laid the groundwork for his eventual participation in the events that would make him infamous as the assassin of Leon Trotsky. His trial, imprisonment, and subsequent release underscored the complex dynamics of Cold War politics and the lengths to which governments were willing to go to advance their ideologies. His story remains a chilling reminder of the ideological struggles and political violence that defined the 20th century. Ramon Mercader died in 1978 at the age of 65 in Havana, Cuba, after battling lung cancer. His reported last words were, "I hear it always. I hear the scream. I know he's waiting for me on the other side." He was laid to rest in Moscow's Kuntsevo Cemetery. I would again like to thank June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. To download June's Journey, just click on the link in the description. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case